sponsored by CuriosityStream. Get over 2,400 documentaries for free for 31 days. Link in the description. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Rene Ritchie, and this is Vector. It's Samsung's big Galaxy Note 10 day today, so I've got Daniel Bader, managing editor of Android Central, on the line to tell all of us all about it.
This year has been about just expanding Samsung's product line. The Galaxy S10 introduced a third model, and then not as well known, but certainly appreciated in the developing market, Samsung overhauled its budget line with the A series, and it introduced like 7, 8, 12, I don't even know how many models, and ran the gamut from $100 all the way up to the really interesting Galaxy A80, which is basically a flagship. So the Note 10 sits obviously at the top, as it always does, but there are two models. There's the smaller Note 10 and the larger Note 10 Plus. And while most people will pay attention to the larger Note 10 Plus because it is just a behemoth, the smaller Note 10 is really taking on the iPhone XS and sort of the small phone market, the small flagship, if you will. And I think it does quite a good job at that. But like with the middle child Galaxy S10, which really didn't get a whole lot of attention, I worry that the smaller Note 10 will fall to the same fate, and people will just not really give it much mind, considering the Note 10 Plus is just that much more interesting.
And also, I think the Note, if nothing else, it's known for its, like the S Pen, of course, but it's known for its size.
It's known for excess, I think. Samsung always introduces new technologies. It experiments with new features on the Note line. At least they used to. And this year they haven't really done that. The Note 10 Plus, while certainly bigger and very powerful, it has a redesigned S Pen and just showcases everything that Samsung's capable of, does not introduce that many new features on the device itself. What it's doing, interestingly, is it's tethering itself to the PC. It's giving us a ton of new features that allow you to interact with your phone from a laptop and wirelessly transfer information, text messages, photos, documents from your Note to a computer. And that's a dynamic that I think Samsung is leaning into after 3 years with DeX, which, while not a huge feature and huge moneymaker for Samsung, is definitely still a differentiator.
And the other thing I think that Samsung in general has been known for is a sort of nerd friendliness. Like, after a lot of other manufacturers stopped doing it, they still had removable batteries, they still had SD card slots, they still had headphone jacks, and that all sounds like it's changing now too.
It's definitely the end of an era for the headphone jack. Samsung will likely, like it did with the Note 10, get rid of it for the S10 or the S11, which is the big flagship for the company. But this is the first time a Samsung flagship hasn't had a headphone jack, and the smaller Note 10 does not have an SD card slot, which is really interesting. Again, the first in a Samsung phone not to have it. The larger S10 Plus or Note 10 Plus does, but you can also see the writings on the wall for that feature. Granted, the base storage is 256 gigabytes, so you're not going to be necessarily wanting for space, but this is a company that is known for appeasing its pro users, and there are going to be a lot of them out there that are not going to be happy with this decision.
Camera technology. There was a post the other day about what Huawei is doing with cameras compared to what everybody else is doing with cameras. And I think the comparison was this giant Huawei sensor next to this relatively small Samsung sensor. Where is Samsung with the cameras on the Galaxy Note 10? Are they where they should be? Or do you think there's going to be a ton of competitive pressure on that this year?
They're nowhere near where they should be. I've been very outspoken about my disappointment with Samsung's camera tech in the last couple of years. The array, while new for the S10 line with 3 cameras, the actual core main sensor is basically unchanged since the Galaxy S7. It's a 1/2.6 inch sensor. It's got, that variable aperture that we saw introduced with the S9, but that has not had the kind of practical impact that I think we were expecting or hoping. In the end, the phone takes fine photos. It takes good photos in daylight and decent photos in low light, especially with the newly introduced night mode that you can now explicitly enter with a recent update to the S10 line. But what we're seeing is that they're being surpassed. They're being surpassed by Pixel on the AI side, on the post-processing side, and they're being surpassed by Huawei on the sheer physics side, where they're introducing massive sensors and doing a lot more with them. Samsung has a long way to go to catch up, and this is not that. This is not them catching up. The core tech on the Galaxy Note 10 line is identical to that of the S10, with some minor changes to the telephoto and the introduction of a time of flight sensor. But the results that you're going to see on the Note 10 are going to be basically what we've seen from every other Samsung phone from the last couple of years, and that's pretty disappointing to me.
Who is the Galaxy Note 10 for at this point? Like, who would you recommend it to?
I don't know. This is $1,000 phone. It's the Note 9 was famously $1,000, and in the Android world at the time, that was basically unheard of. Now we're moving up to $1,100 MSRP for the Note 10 Plus. This is not a cheap phone. It's very, very close in terms of features and technology to the S10 line, which can be obtained for hundreds of dollars less. I really don't know anymore how many people are, these diehard S Pen stands that will, they will die on the vine trying to support it. I just think that the S Pen is no longer an essential tool for the vast majority of smartphone users, and for those who do need it, I would honestly recommend earlier versions of the Note. I mean, I've been using, in order to prepare for this launch, I loaded up my Note 8 from 2017, and it's working great. It got the One UI update a few days ago. It runs really well, and it has the S Pen that has been basically unchanged for years. The S Pen in this year's Note 10 lineup is a little different because you can use air gestures to change songs or take a photo, things like that. But the core fundamentals of the S Pen are unchanged. And if you would like the Galaxy experience without needing that stylus, go with an S10. You won't be disappointed.
And we've seen, Google is leaking their own Pixel 4 this year, which I want to get into with you at some point, but not now. But based on what you've seen so far about the Pixel 4, how would you position the Note? If people are thinking about the Note 10 versus the Pixel 4, what would you tell them?
Well, I think the Pixel 4 is going to be a lot more interesting than the leaks than Google's own leaks have made it appear. The Soli chip just introduces a whole bunch of interesting UX opportunities that.
And that's the radar chip?
That's the radar chip that was developed in advanced technologies and projects inside Google. It could be one of those things where your phone's across the room and you just want to change the volume on a song. You don't want to hey G. You just want to twist your finger a little bit and change the volume. That's the very simplest version of that input. But Google, I think, because they're owning more and more of their own of the stack, I think that Soli could be really interesting and something that would, aside from the camera, really get people talking about the Pixel lineup again.
And it sounds like the Pixel 4 is going to heavily compete for real estate in nerd brains with the tech that they're offering.
I agree, and especially with the reduction in the number of manufacturers competing in North America, especially for Android users' attention. Samsung is just going to be pushing out yet another great phone, but maybe, and I think the nerds in the room are probably going to be waiting until October for Google's announcement of the Pixel 4.
And I know we've seen additional Huawei phones, we've seen additional OnePlus phones, but how do you sort of compare the Galaxy Note 10 to people who are now used to getting flagship-like features? Even Samsung's Galaxy S10
Yeah.
was it? And the Google Pixel 3a. They're used to getting a lot of the flagship features at half the flagship
Well, what's
price.
interesting is that Samsung introduced for the first time its A series phones in the US at a carrier. So Verizon now stocks the $350 Galaxy A50, which is a tremendous phone. It's got a triple camera setup, it's got an in-display fingerprint sensor, and it's a pretty competitive phone for the price. So even Samsung understands that where it's still going to price out many of its customers at $1,000, $1,100, it is giving those loyal Samsung brand aficionados something to talk about at the low end and mid range. So I don't know whether Samsung can continue increasing its pricing every year, but it's probably going to, as long as Apple has the cojones to do the same thing. And I think that's really what it comes down to.
All right, so you just mentioned Apple. We have the iPhone 11 on the horizon as well, and as usual, there's been a ton of leaks there. Equilateral 3-camera array and a new haptic engine. There'll be a Max version. Every year we're teased with pencil support. We never quite get it. Where do you see that positioned against the Galaxy Note?
Well, the Snapdragon 855 in the Galaxy Note 10, is powerful, and it was the biggest year-over-year leap over previous Snapdragons that we've seen, I think, in 4 years. So the Snapdragon in that phone is powerful, but it's still the same chip that we've seen in basically every other Android flagship. Interestingly, the phone is not going to be powered by the newly announced Snapdragon 855 Plus, which is aimed at gaming phones. Apple is increasingly in control of its entire chip flow, and basically has shown year after year that its silicon lead is not going away. Now with the prospect of it putting its own modems in its phones, not this year, but certainly possible in 2021 or 22, we'll see increased competition on the the 5G side of things. I don't know how much people are going to compare the iPhone 11 Max or whatever it's called, but it's very interesting that Samsung is introducing a smaller Note product in anticipation of increased competition, because I think that if it's looking for new customers, it's going to find them with iPhone XS and regular iPhone size users who are not that enamored with iOS anymore. But again, the crossover may not be as much this year as it has been in years past.
So you mentioned 5G, and I think that's a great place for us to end this. Samsung has been an early adopter, both of them,
they've got
of
plenty
5G,
of both, yeah.
but we still haven't seen much in the way of 5G. If someone is sitting on a micro cell, are those the people that should look at it? Is there anybody else who should be looking at future-proofing or just getting on the 5G train as it starts to huff and puff in the station?
No. End call. No, it's not this year. Even though the Galaxy S or the Galaxy Note 10 Plus 5G, which is the mouthful that I never wish I had to say, is going to be using Qualcomm's newer and much more efficient X55 modem chip, which supports both millimeter wave and sub-6 in the same piece of silicon. I really don't think that there's any reason to jump on 5G in 2019. I think wait until next year when the actual networks are up and running, and you don't have to worry that if you cross the street or around the corner of your hometown, you're going to go back onto LTE. There's no reason to jump on 5G just yet.
So to sum things up, it sounds like if you really love Samsung, you really hate headphone jacks, and you want you some S Pen, then boy, do they have a new phone for
And
you.
the phone is beautiful. It's really, I've been down on some of it, but I have to say that Samsung has done a great job designing the Note 10. It's objectively better looking than the S10 lineup. It feels as always extremely solid and just well-rounded, literally and figuratively, with that curved OLED display. And now with the smaller Note 10, there is at least a Note for people who don't want massive phones but want that S Pen as well. So if that's you, you're gonna love this phone. It's just I think that audience is shrinking every year.
You can find Daniel on Twitter at JourneyDan, and you should right now head on over to Android Central on the web and on YouTube for much more, so much more Galaxy Note 10 goodness. And if you're getting a shiny new Galaxy Note 10 and want to know what to do with it, splash CuriosityStream up on that big, beautiful display. CuriosityStream is the world's first streaming service to address our lifelong quest to learn, to explore, to understand. It features original content with Stephen Hawking, Sigourney Weaver, Michio Kaku, David Attenborough, Sylvia Earle, Jane Goodall, and many more. Take Trek Nation, for example. In it, the son of the creator of Star Trek goes out and explores his father's famous creation and legacy and shows how it has affected people. Go to curiositystream.com/vector for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series, and enter promo code VECTOR to start your membership completely free for the first 31 days. Thanks, CuriosityStream, and thanks to all of you for supporting Vector. So, are you eyeing the Galaxy Note 10 with pen lust in your heart? Or are you holding out for one of the iPhones 11? Maybe the Google Pixel 4? Whatever is next from Huawei or OnePlus? Something, anything that still has a headphone jack? Hit like, hit subscribe, true north that bell gizmo so you don't miss the next video, and then hit up the comments below and let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next video.